Charles Williams sat in the corner of the hospital waiting room, his hands shaking as he stared at the white-tiled floor. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a harsh glow on everything around him. He had been sitting there for 3 hours, ever since the doctors rushed Kate into the emergency room after her sudden collapse at their daughter's school play. The waiting room was filled with other worried families, but Charles felt completely alone. His mind kept replaying the moment when Kate had grabbed his arm during Emma's solo performance, her face pale and her breathing shallow. She had whispered, "Something's wrong," before falling to the floor, and Charles had never felt so helpless in his entire life. Kate had always been the strong one in their marriage. She was the one who handled the difficult conversations with their teenage son Michael when he got into trouble. She was the one who stayed up all night when Emma had pneumonia last winter. She was the one who kept their family together when Charles lost his job 2 years ago and fell into a deep depression that lasted months. Now, as he waited for news about her condition, Charles realized how much he had taken her strength for granted. They had been married for 18 years, and somewhere along the way, he had stopped really seeing her. He had stopped appreciating the small things she did every day to keep their family running smoothly. He had stopped telling her how beautiful she was, how much he loved her laugh, how grateful he was for everything she did. The doctor finally appeared, his expression serious but not grave. Charles jumped to his feet, his heart pounding in his chest. The doctor explained that Kate had suffered a severe panic attack brought on by exhaustion and stress. Her body had simply shut down from carrying too much weight for too long. She was stable now, but she needed rest and support to recover fully. As Charles followed the doctor down the long hallway to Kate's room, he made a promise to himself. Things were going to change. He was going to be the husband and father his family deserved. He was going to show Kate how much she meant to him, not just with words, but with actions that proved his love every single day. When he pushed open the door to her room, Kate was awake but looked fragile against the white hospital sheets. Her usually bright eyes were tired, and her brown hair was messy from the medical procedures. But, to Charles, she had never looked more beautiful. She was alive, she was going to be okay, and he had been given a second chance to be the man she fell in love with all those years ago. Kate smiled weakly when she saw him, and Charles felt his throat tighten with emotion. He had almost lost her today, not to death, but to his own neglect and taking her for granted. He pulled the chair close to her bedside and took her hand gently in his. The room was quiet except for the steady beeping of the heart monitor, and Charles knew that this moment was going to change everything between them. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his voice breaking slightly. "I'm so sorry, Kate. I should have seen how tired you were. I should have been helping you more. I should have been the partner you deserved instead of just another person you had to take care of." Kate squeezed his hand weakly, tears forming in her eyes. She had been carrying the weight of their family's problems alone for so long that she had forgotten what it felt like to have someone truly share the burden with her. Charles's words were the first sign that maybe things could be different, that maybe she didn't have to be strong all the time. The next few hours passed slowly as Kate drifted in and out of sleep, and Charles never left her side. He watched the rise and fall of her chest, grateful for each breath she took. He thought about all the conversations they needed to have, all the changes he needed to make, and all the ways he could show her that she was the most important thing in his world. When the nurses came to check on Kate, Charles stepped out into the hallway and called their children. Emma, who was only 12, cried when she heard that her mother was in the hospital. Michael, who was 16 and usually too cool to show emotion, asked quietly if Mom was going to be okay. Charles assured them both that Kate would recover, and he promised to bring them to see her the next day. As the night wore on, Charles found himself really looking at Kate for the first time in years. He noticed the small lines around her eyes that came from worrying about their family. He saw how her hands, which had comforted him through countless difficult moments, looked worn from all the work she did to keep their household running. He realized that while he had been going through the motions of being a husband, Kate had been pouring her heart and soul into being a wife and mother. The morning sun was beginning to filter through the hospital window when Kate woke up feeling slightly stronger. Charles was still there, his head resting on the edge of her bed where he had fallen asleep holding her hand. She studied his face, seeing the worry lines and the exhaustion, and felt a flicker of the love that had sustained them through their early years together. When Charles opened his eyes and saw her watching him, he sat up quickly. "How are you feeling? Do you need anything? Should I call the nurse?" The concern in his voice was genuine, and Kate felt something shift between them. It had been so long since someone had worried about her well-being that she had almost forgotten what it felt like to be cared for. "I feel a little better," she said softly. "Charles, we need to talk about things. About us. About our family. I can't keep doing everything by myself. I'm so tired. And today scared me because I realized that I've been running on empty for a long time." Charles nodded, understanding the weight of her words. He knew that this conversation was long overdue, and he was ready to hear whatever she needed to tell him. He was ready to face the truth about how his withdrawal from family life had affected her, and he was determined to make things right. The conversation that followed was the most honest one Charles and Kate had shared in years. Kate spoke quietly but clearly about how lonely she had felt in their marriage, even though they lived in the same house and slept in the same bed every night. She talked about how she had tried to get his attention in small ways, suggesting date nights or family activities, only to be met with distracted responses or promises that never materialized. Charles listened without interrupting, feeling shame wash over him as he realized how many signals he had missed. Kate described the morning she had made his favorite breakfast, and he had eaten it while reading emails on his phone, never once looking up to thank her or even acknowledge her effort. She mentioned the evening she had bought a new dress and asked how she looked, and he had glanced up briefly and said fine before returning to the television. "I started to feel invisible," Kate admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Like I was just there to make sure everything ran smoothly, but not because you actually wanted me there. I love our children more than life itself, but I missed being a woman, not just a mother. I missed being your wife, not just the person who manages your household." Charles felt tears sting his eyes as he realized how completely he had failed the woman who had given him everything. When he lost his job 2 years earlier, Kate had picked up extra shifts at the local library where she worked part-time. She had never once complained about the financial strain or made him feel guilty about being unemployed. Instead, she had quietly carried the burden while encouraging him to pursue new opportunities. "I was so wrapped up in my own problems," Charles said, his voice thick with regret. "After I lost my job, I felt like such a failure as a husband and father. I thought you and the kids would be better off if I just stayed out of the way and tried not to cause any more trouble. I didn't realize that by pulling away, I was making everything worse for you." Kate reached for his hand, understanding now why he had become so distant. "You weren't a failure, Charles. Losing your job wasn't your fault. The company downsized and let go of dozens of good employees. But when you shut me out, I felt like I had lost my husband on top of everything else we were dealing with." They talked about the small moments that had created distance between them. Charles admitted that he had stopped initiating conversations because he was afraid Kate would see how lost and depressed he felt. Kate explained that she had stopped sharing her daily experiences with him because his responses had become so mechanical that she felt like she was bothering him. "I want to fix this," Charles said firmly. "I want to be the husband you fell in love with again. I want to be present in our marriage and in our children's lives. I don't want you to carry everything alone anymore. Tell me what I need to do, and I'll do it." Kate looked into his eyes and saw something she hadn't seen in a long time: genuine determination and love. "I need you to come back to us," she said simply. "I need you to be interested in our lives again. I need you to help make decisions about the children and the house and our future. I need you to see me as more than just the person who takes care of everything." The doctor came in later that morning to check on Kate's progress and was pleased with her improvement. He recommended that she take at least a week off work and avoid any stressful situations while her body recovered. He also suggested that the family consider counseling to address the underlying issues that had contributed to Kate's breakdown. Charles immediately agreed to the counseling suggestion, much to Kate's surprise. The old Charles would have dismissed therapy as unnecessary or embarrassing. This willingness to seek help showed Kate that he was serious about making changes, not just making promises he wouldn't keep. When Emma and Michael arrived at the hospital that afternoon, the difference in their father's demeanor was immediately noticeable. Instead of sitting quietly in the corner while they visited with their mother, Charles actively participated in the conversation. He asked Emma about her feelings regarding the school play and whether she was upset about what had happened. He talked to Michael about an upcoming basketball game and showed genuine interest in his son's answers. The children exchanged glances, clearly surprised by their father's engagement. For months, he had been physically present but emotionally absent, going through the motions of family life without really connecting. Now he was asking questions, making eye contact, and actually listening to their responses. "Dad's being weird," Emma whispered to her brother when Charles stepped out to speak with the nurse. Good weird or bad weird? Michael asked. I think good weird, Emma replied thoughtfully. He actually listened when I told him about Sarah's birthday party next weekend. He even asked what kind of present I wanted to get her. Kate watched these interactions with a mixture of hope and caution. She had been disappointed too many times to fully trust that Charles's change would be permanent. But seeing him truly engage with their children for the first time in months made her heart feel lighter than it had in a very long time. That evening, after the children went home with Kate's sister, Charles sat beside Kate's bed, and they made concrete plans for how things would be different. He promised to take over the morning routine with the children so Kate could have a few extra minutes of sleep. He committed to cooking dinner at least 3 nights a week and handling all the cleanup afterward. Most importantly, he pledged to put away his phone during family time and to have real conversations with Kate about her day, her thoughts, and her feelings. I know I have a lot to prove, Charles said as the sun set outside the hospital window. I know that words are easy and following through is hard. But, Kate, I promise you that I'm going to show you every day how much you mean to me. I'm going to be the partner you deserve, the father our children need, and the man I used to be before I let fear and depression take over my life. Kate squeezed his hand, feeling cautiously optimistic for the first time in months. She knew that rebuilding their marriage would take time and consistent effort from both of them. But seeing Charles's genuine remorse and his willingness to take responsibility for his part in their problems gave her hope that they could find their way back to each other. The next morning, Kate was discharged from the hospital with instructions to rest and follow up with her doctor in a week. Charles had already arranged to take time off work to help her recover and to begin implementing the changes they had discussed. As they walked out of the hospital together, Kate felt like she was leaving with a different man than the one who had brought her there 2 days earlier. The first week of Kate's recovery became a turning point for the entire Williams family. True to his word, Charles took over the morning routine, waking up early to make breakfast and help the children get ready for school. The first few days were chaotic as he learned where everything was kept and figured out the timing, but Emma and Michael were patient with his efforts and even seemed to enjoy having their father more involved in their daily lives. Kate found it strange to wake up to the sound of Charles's voice downstairs, talking and laughing with their children. For so long, mornings had been her responsibility while Charles rushed around getting ready for work in silence. Now she could hear him helping Emma find her library book and asking Michael about his plans for after school. These simple interactions filled Kate with a warmth she hadn't felt in years. On the third day, Kate came downstairs to find Charles sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and a notepad, writing down questions to ask at their first counseling appointment. He looked up when she entered, and his face brightened in a way that reminded her of their early dating years. "Good morning, beautiful," he said, standing to pour her a cup of coffee prepared exactly the way she liked it. "I made your favorite oatmeal, and I already fed the kids breakfast before they left for school. Emma wanted me to tell you that she got an A on her math test yesterday." Kate accepted the coffee gratefully, noticing that Charles had remembered she liked cream, but no sugar. It was such a small detail, but it meant everything to her that he had paid attention. "You've been amazing this week," she said, settling into the chair beside him. "I can see you're really trying, and it means more to me than you know." Charles reached across the table and took her hand. "I want you to know that this isn't just about making up for what happened at the hospital. This is about becoming the man I should have been all along. I've been thinking about our early years together, and I realized I used to know everything about you. I knew your dreams, your fears, your favorite songs, the way you liked your eggs cooked. Somewhere along the way, I stopped paying attention to those things. Life gets busy," Kate said gently. "Children, work, responsibilities, they all pile up. I stopped sharing those things with you too because I thought you weren't interested anymore. I want to know everything again," Charles said earnestly. "I want to know what you think about when you're driving to work. I want to know which books you've been reading and whether you still dream about traveling to Ireland like you used to. I want to know what makes you laugh and what keeps you awake at night." Their first counseling session took place the following week in a comfortable office with soft lighting and warm colors. Dr. Martinez, their therapist, was a gentle woman in her 50s who specialized in marriage counseling. She listened carefully as both Charles and Kate shared their perspectives on what had led to the crisis in their relationship. "Charles, you mentioned feeling like a failure after losing your job," Dr. Martinez said. "Can you tell me more about how that affected your role in the family?" Charles shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "I felt like I had let everyone down. Kate was working extra hours to make up for my lost income, and I couldn't shake the feeling that my family would be better off without me. So I withdrew. I thought I was protecting them from my negativity, but I realize now that I was just abandoning them when they needed me most. And Kate, Dr. Martinez turned to her. How did Charles's withdrawal affect you? It felt like I was married to a ghost, Kate said quietly. He was physically present, but emotionally he had checked out. I started to wonder if he still loved me or if he was just staying because leaving would be too complicated. I felt like I was raising 2 children and managing a teenager all by myself. Dr. Martinez nodded understandingly. It's common for couples to fall into patterns where one partner becomes overfunctional while the other becomes underfunctional. Kate, you stepped up to handle everything when Charles was struggling, which allowed him to step back even further. Neither of you intended for this to happen, but it created an imbalance that became unsustainable. Over the next several sessions, they learned communication tools and strategies for rebuilding intimacy in their marriage. Charles practiced expressing his feelings without minimizing them, while Kate learned to ask for help instead of assuming she had to handle everything alone. They established weekly check-ins where they could discuss their individual needs and any concerns about their relationship. At home, the changes became more noticeable each day. Charles began taking initiative without being asked, whether it was scheduling maintenance for Kate's car or planning a family movie night. He started leaving small notes in Kate's lunch bag, simple messages like, thinking of you, or can't wait to hear about your day. Kate, feeling supported for the first time in years, began sharing more of herself with Charles again. One evening, about a month after Kate's hospital stay, Charles surprised her by recreating their first date. He had arranged for Kate's sister to watch the children and had prepared a picnic dinner to take to the park where they had walked and talked for hours 18 years earlier. Kate was touched by the effort he had put into remembering the details, the same type of sandwiches they had shared, the same brand of lemonade, even the same playlist of songs they had listened to in his car. I remember being so nervous that night, Charles said as they sat on the blanket watching the sunset. You were the most beautiful woman I had ever seen, and I couldn't believe you had agreed to go out with me. I spent the whole evening trying to impress you and make you laugh. You didn't need to try so hard, Kate replied, leaning against his shoulder. I was already impressed by how kind you were to the waitress at the restaurant where we met. I fell in love with your character before I fell in love with anything else about you. I want to be that man again, Charles said, wrapping his arm around her. I want to be someone you can respect and admire, not just tolerate because we're married. You're already becoming that man again, Kate said softly. I can see him in the way you've been taking care of our family these past few weeks. I can see him in your willingness to go to counseling and do the hard work of fixing our marriage. I can see him right now, in this moment, as you try to show me how much I mean to you. That night, for the first time in over a year, they talked until the early hours of the morning. They shared dreams and fears, discussed their hopes for their children's futures, and rediscovered the intellectual and emotional connection that had drawn them together in the first place. Kate felt like she was falling in love with her husband all over again, while Charles felt like he was emerging from a long, dark tunnel into the light. The children noticed the changes too. Emma commented that her parents seemed happier and asked fewer questions about why Dad was always tired or why Mom looked sad. Michael, who had been struggling with his own behavioral issues, began opening up more to both parents instead of primarily confiding in his mother. The entire family dynamic shifted as Charles stepped back into his role as an active, engaged husband and father. By the end of the second month, Kate felt stronger both physically and emotionally than she had in years. The exhaustion that had led to her breakdown was replaced by energy that came from feeling supported and valued. Charles had not only kept his promises but had exceeded her expectations in his commitment to change. 3 months after Kate's breakdown, the Williams family faced their first real test of their new dynamic. Michael got suspended from school for getting into a fight with another student, and Emma was struggling with anxiety about an upcoming presentation in her advanced English class. In the past, Kate would have handled both situations alone, while Charles remained peripherally involved. This time was different. When the school called about Michael's suspension, Charles immediately left work and met Kate at the principal's office. They presented a united front as they listened to the details of the incident and worked together to determine appropriate consequences. Later, they sat down with Michael as a team to discuss his behavior and help him develop better strategies for managing his anger. I'm not proud of what I did, Michael admitted as they talked in the living room that evening. But, Dad, I'm glad you came to the meeting today. It felt good to have both of you there supporting me. even though I messed up. Charles felt a lump form in his throat as he realized how much his absence had affected his son over the past few years. I should have been there for more things, he said honestly. I'm sorry that you've had to deal with difficult situations without having both your parents fully present. That's going to change. With Emma's anxiety about her presentation, Charles surprised everyone by offering to help her practice. He had always been good at public speaking in his professional life, but he had never shared that skill with his daughter before. They spent several evenings working on her speech, with Charles providing encouragement and practical tips while Kate offered emotional support. The night before Emma's presentation, she was still nervous despite all their preparation. Charles sat on the edge of her bed as she expressed her fears about forgetting her words or being judged by her classmates. You know what I learned in business presentations? Charles said gently. The audience wants you to succeed. Your classmates aren't hoping you'll fail. They're probably just relieved they don't have to go first. And if you make a mistake, so what? Everyone makes mistakes. What matters is how you handle it. Emma smiled, feeling more confident with her father's wisdom. Thanks, Dad. I'm still nervous, but I feel better knowing you, and Mom believe in me. The presentation went wonderfully, and Emma came home glowing with pride. Charles and Kate celebrated by taking her out for ice cream, making her feel like the star she was. These moments of family connection, which had been rare during Charles's difficult period, were becoming the new normal. Kate's own healing continued as she rediscovered parts of herself that had been buried under years of overwhelming responsibility. With Charles truly sharing the parental and household duties, she had time to pursue interests that had been set aside. She joined a book club at the library where she worked and signed up for a photography class she had wanted to take for years. Charles not only supported these endeavors, but actively encouraged them. He rearranged his schedule to be home with the children when Kate had her book club meetings, and he surprised her with a high-quality camera for their wedding anniversary. When she showed him the photographs she was taking in her class, his genuine enthusiasm reminded Kate of how he used to celebrate her accomplishments in their early years together. These are incredible, Charles said, studying her photos of local landscapes and candid family moments. You have such an artistic eye. I had forgotten how talented you are at capturing beautiful moments. I had forgotten too, Kate admitted. It feels good to have something that's just mine, something I'm doing because I enjoy it rather than because someone needs me to do it. Their relationship continued to deepen through their weekly counseling sessions and daily efforts to stay connected. They instituted a tradition of taking walks together after dinner, using the time to talk without the distractions of phones or television. These walks became sacred time where they shared their thoughts, discussed their concerns, and dreamed about their future together. One evening, as they walked through their neighborhood discussing Emma's upcoming graduation from middle school, Charles stopped suddenly and turned to face Kate. I need to tell you something, he said, his voice serious but warm. These past few months have been the happiest I've been in years, not just because things are better between us, but because I feel like myself again. I feel like the man I was meant to be. You gave me another chance when I didn't deserve it, and you've been patient with me while I figured out how to be a good husband again. Kate felt tears prick her eyes at the sincerity in his voice. Charles, we both had work to do. I had to learn how to ask for help instead of trying to be everything to everyone. We saved our marriage together. I love you, Charles said, reaching for her hands. Not just because we have history together or because we have children together, but because you're an amazing woman who makes me want to be the best version of myself. I love your laugh, your kindness, your strength, and your big heart. I love the way you make our house feel like home, and how you make our children feel safe and loved. Kate's tears flowed freely now as she heard the words she had been longing for during those dark months when she felt invisible and unappreciated. I love you too, she whispered. I love the man you're becoming again. I love seeing you with our children and watching them light up when you give them your full attention. I love that you see me again, really see me. They held each other on the quiet street, both understanding that they had traveled through the darkness and emerged stronger on the other side. Their marriage was no longer just surviving. It was thriving in ways it hadn't since their early years together. The following month brought an unexpected challenge that would test the strength of their renewed bond. Charles was offered a promotion at work that would require him to travel frequently and work longer hours. The old Charles might have accepted immediately without consulting Kate, seeing only the financial benefits and career advancement. Instead, he asked for a week to consider the offer and immediately discussed it with Kate. They spent several long conversations weighing the pros and cons, considering the impact on their family, and discussing whether the timing was right for such a significant change. The money would be great, Kate said thoughtfully, and I know this is the kind of opportunity you've been hoping for. But I'm worried about losing the progress we've made. These past few months have been so good for all of us. Charles nodded, appreciating that she was being honest about her concerns rather than just telling him what she thought he wanted to hear. I'm worried about that too. But I think we're strong enough now to handle the challenges. And if we try it, and it doesn't work, I can look for something else. The difference is that now we'll face whatever comes up together. After much discussion and prayer, they decided that Charles would accept the promotion with clear boundaries about his availability during family time and a commitment to regular communication when he was traveling. Kate would continue working at the library and pursuing her photography, knowing that Charles would maintain his equal share of parental responsibilities even with his increased work demands. 1 year after Kate's breakdown, the Williams family gathered for Emma's graduation from middle school. Charles sat beside Kate in the auditorium, their hands intertwined as they watched their daughter receive an award for academic excellence. The moment felt surreal to Kate as she reflected on how different their lives had become. The previous evening, Charles had surprised Kate with a letter he had written, expressing his gratitude for her patience and forgiveness during his difficult period. In the letter, he detailed specific moments when she had shown him grace, times when she could have given up on their marriage but chose to fight for it instead. He thanked her for seeing the man he could become again, even when he couldn't see it himself. Reading that letter last night made me realize something, Kate whispered to Charles as they waited for Emma's name to be called. We're not the same people we were before my breakdown. We're better. We've been through something that could have destroyed our marriage, but instead it made us stronger. Charles squeezed her hand, remembering the fear he had felt in that hospital waiting room and how it had motivated him to become a better man. I never want to take you for granted again, he whispered back. Every day I wake up grateful that you gave us another chance. When Emma walked across the stage to receive her diploma, both parents beamed with pride. But more than that, they felt proud of themselves as a family unit. Emma was confident and happy. Michael had turned his behavior around and was excelling in his sophomore year of high school, and Charles and Kate were more in love than they had been since their honeymoon. After the ceremony, the family went out to celebrate at Emma's favorite restaurant. As they sat around the table sharing stories and laughing together, Michael made an observation that touched both his parents deeply. You guys are so different now, he said, looking at Charles and Kate. I mean, you're happier. And, Dad, you're actually here, you know? Like, really here. It makes everything feel more stable, like our family is solid again. Emma nodded in agreement. I used to worry that you and Mom were going to get divorced because you barely talked to each other. Now you actually seem to like being together. It makes me feel safer somehow. Charles felt a stab of regret at hearing how his emotional absence had affected his children's sense of security. But he also felt hopeful knowing that his efforts to change had been noticed and appreciated by the people who mattered most to him. We went through a rough patch, Charles said honestly. But we worked hard to fix the problems in our marriage. Your mom and I love each other very much, and we love both of you more than words can express. This family is the most important thing in the world to us. Kate added, sometimes grown-ups have to learn new ways of loving each other and taking care of their families. We're still learning, but we're doing it together now. Later that evening, after the children had gone to bed, Charles and Kate sat on their back porch talking about the day and their hopes for the future. Charles had been in his new position for 3 months now, and they had successfully navigated the challenges of his increased travel and responsibilities. The key had been their commitment to intentional communication and their willingness to adjust their strategies when something wasn't working. I have something I want to ask you, Charles said, turning to face Kate with a nervous smile. I know we've been married for 18 years, but I feel like we're starting fresh in so many ways. Would you go away with me for a weekend? Just the two of us. No work, no kids, no distractions. I want to celebrate who we've become and dream about where we want to go from here. Kate's eyes lit up with excitement. They hadn't taken a trip alone together in over 5 years. I would love that. Where did you have in mind? Remember that little bed and breakfast in the mountains that we always said we wanted to visit? I thought maybe we could finally make that happen. We could go hiking, sit by the fireplace, talk for hours like we used to do before life got so complicated. That sounds perfect, Kate said, leaning over to kiss him softly. I can't remember the last time I was this excited about something. The weekend trip, which took place a month later, became a milestone in their renewed relationship. They hiked mountain trails, explored small towns, and spent hours talking about their dreams for the next phase of their lives. They discussed the possibility of traveling together once the children were grown, Kate's interest in opening a photography studio, and Charles's idea of eventually starting his own consulting business. More importantly, they talked about the lessons they had learned from their near-divorce experience. They identified the warning signs they would watch for in the future: periods of disconnection, lack of appreciation, taking each other for granted. They made promises to each other about maintaining the habits that had restored their marriage: regular communication, shared responsibilities, intentional time together, and never again assuming that their relationship could survive on autopilot. On their last evening at the bed and breakfast, Charles made a gesture that left everyone in the cozy restaurant frozen in amazement. As Kate was telling him about a photograph she wanted to take of the sunset over the mountains, Charles suddenly stood up from their table, reached for her hand, and pulled her into a slow dance right there in the dining room. There was no music playing, but Charles hummed their wedding song as he held Kate close and swayed gently with her among the empty tables. The other diners stopped their conversations to watch, enchanted by the obvious love between this middle-aged couple who were dancing like newlyweds. Kate felt tears of joy running down her cheeks as she danced with her husband in front of strangers who would never know that just 1 year earlier, their marriage had been hanging by a thread. The spontaneous dance represented everything that had changed between them: Charles's willingness to be vulnerable and romantic, his desire to celebrate their love publicly, and his commitment to making Kate feel cherished and special. When the song ended, the entire restaurant erupted in applause, and several couples commented on how inspiring it was to see such devotion between married partners. Charles and Kate returned to their table glowing with happiness and more connected than they had felt in years. "What made you do that?" Kate asked, her cheeks still flushed with excitement. "I realized I was listening to the most beautiful woman in the world tell me about her dreams, and I just wanted to hold her and celebrate the fact that she's mine," Charles replied. "I spent too many years forgetting to show you how lucky I am to be married to you. I don't ever want to make that mistake again." As they drove home the next day, both Charles and Kate felt grateful for the journey that had brought them to this place. The breakdown that had terrified them both had ultimately become the catalyst for the marriage they had always wanted but hadn't known how to create. They had learned that love alone wasn't enough to sustain a marriage. It required daily choice, conscious effort, and the courage to be vulnerable with each other. Their story became an inspiration to other couples in their counseling group and their community. Dr. Martinez often used their example to show clients that marriages could not only survive major crises, but could emerge stronger and more fulfilling than before. Charles and Kate began mentoring younger couples, sharing their hard-won wisdom about the importance of intentional marriage and the danger of taking each other for granted. Years later, as they celebrated their 25th wedding anniversary with their children and grandchildren, Charles would still spontaneously reach for Kate's hand during family dinners or pull her into impromptu dances in their kitchen. And every time he did, Kate would remember that moment in the restaurant when everyone had stopped to watch them dance, frozen in amazement at the power of love that had been tested, broken, and beautifully restored.